بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. ما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. It is only the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that while our hearts are still beating, while our souls still intact our body, بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. ما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته once again. We have to begin with praise and thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the fact that our bodies are still intact with our souls, that our hearts are still breathing, it's still beating. We are still here with another day, with another chance, another opportunity to mend our ways. It is only the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for without it, we're doomed. So we begin with this realization that if we have the chance to do something about our hearts, the diseases of the hearts, then this is the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His compassion, the most compassionate. But then, what are we going to do about this? Do we even have hope? As we talked about different hearts yesterday, the healthy heart, which is a sound heart, the diseased heart, and the diseased heart. Most of us, we fear having, and we should have this fear of having the sick heart. But Is a sick heart a hopeless heart? A hopeless case? No, it's not. And how do we know that? If we have in our hearts, or if we are aware of somebody else around us, of our loved ones, from our family or friends, or just the people around us. If there is a void that we feel within us or around us, should we just have a wishful thinking? Should we just rely on that extreme hope, which is not part of Islam, just like extreme fear is not part of Islam? It's a balance between the two that one has to strike. On what basis do we give hope to our own hearts, and how do we give hope or think positively about another that we may feel is far away from Allah? We will take the consolation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. But before the consolation, the ayah that I'm about to discuss, within that ayah, there's first a very strong warning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala admonishes, tells us about the hopeless ones, the hopeless heart, the dead heart. But then he speaks of the diseased heart, which still has a chance, which still has some hope. But even within the hopeful cases, there are three different situations, three different kinds of hearts. And that gives us a lot more hope when we consider the fact that the manner in which someone comes closer to Allah is not the same always. We cannot paint everyone with the same brush. So what is this ayah? Let's begin with the warning in this ayah. It's an ayah of Suratul Baqarah, the second surah of the Quran. This ayah is the 74th ayah of Suratul Baqarah, and it comes right after the story of Baqarah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about, the story of Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us of a nation that were shown numerous miracles. They had seen, they had witnessed, experienced so many miracles. Yet, another miracle in the case of this, the story of Baqarah itself. But then they would still not submit completely to Allah. I mean, it's not that we're not even talking about the non-Muslims. These were the Muslims of that time, the Bani Israel. These were the Muslims of that time. You know how sometimes we say, oh, only if I had seen something supernatural, some great miracle with my own eyes, then, it'll be easier for me to submit or to be focused, to worship, to dedicate myself, to believe. But this nation did have a lot of miracles that they witnessed with their own eyes, generation after generation, generation after generation, with each and every prophet of Allah. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us why they didn't change. The hearts did not transform. I mean, of course, we're not talking about all of them, because from amongst them came the prophets also. There were a few righteous people amongst them too, but we're talking about most of them. And the interesting thing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of the knowledgeable people amongst them most. He admonishes subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala admonishes the knowledgeable ones amongst them the most. So before the 74th ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of their external state, their external deeds of disobedience, transgression, their speech, their constant questioning, you know, unnecessary questioning and constant questioning. They're mocking those who are righteous, who are obedient, who are beloved to Allah, who give priority to what is pleasing to Allah over dunya. They used to mock those people. And whenever they were told that something is commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever they were told something is commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, most of these people would ask why. What's the reason behind it? What's the benefit? What's the justification? This and this and this. They would always ask just way too many questions. These are the people, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of their transgression in their speech and their deeds, in the 74th ayah, He then informs us of the internal state, the cause of the transgression in their external state. When He says, "Ba'adadu billah, ثم كست قلوبكم من بعد ذلك فهي كالحجارة أو أشد قسوة." Then your hearts became hardened. ثم, then, يعني after you were shown the miracle. It was specifically about the story of Baqarah. After that, قست قلوبكم من بعد ذلك. Your hearts had become hardened after that. يعني you witnessed with your own eyes, not like you were told by your forefathers or you read about it, you saw with your own eyes. Yet after that, you were adamant in disobeying Allah. Now, what does it mean? How do hearts become hard? I mean, hearts don't literally become hard, like physically. So this is basically similitude being given. And this is what we call a balagha, a rhetorical speech, a beautiful balagha in the Quran. For something to be qasat, comes from qaf, sin, and waw, it's like, imagine there's a land which does not grow anything. It's a very harsh, dry land. That land is called ardun qasiyah. If at night there is not a single star or moon, nothing, and it's absolutely dark, a very dark night, that's called laylatul qasiyah. For a person who, even though they know they're wrong, but they hold on to their wrong stance deliberately because of their ego, they're stubborn, they're just stubborn. So even when they realize in an argument that they are wrong, they hold on to their argument because they just don't want to be wrong. So such a person's heart, qasawat. So for a heart to be qaswa means it's heartless, it's so hard, it's so dry. I mean, everything that goes towards it bounces back. Everything good bounces back. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of the other names for the heart, uses the most prominent, obvious name, which is qalb, because of the beauty of the meaning of this word. And if we understand what our heart is like, of every human, in the very meaning captured, in the very meaning of it, even then that could give us consolation. Even that in itself can give us consolation. Qalb, coming from qaf, lam, and ba, basically is like, for instance, like when a farmer is during cultivation takes a piece of iron to turn the earth over, that piece of iron is called miqlab, turning it over, the earth, the soil. When you're making bread and one side of the bread is cooked, and then you turn it over, flip it over to cook the other side. So that would be called what? Qalb al-khubz. A snake on a hot sand, when it goes from side to side, turning from side to side, it's called taqallab. Now, this is the first meaning of the root that the word qalb, heart, comes from. Qalb is basically to keep turning something up and down, and something keep on changing. It's never in the same state. And that's the reality of the heart. It has other meanings too. There are around 3-4 other meanings, but this is the one we'll hold on to right now. Like, for instance, purity, like when you say something is very pure, the pure part of something. You want to say this person is a pure Arab, you would say has Arabiyyun qalb. Qalb also means that, for instance, in Surah Al-Hajj, to understand something, to have insight in something. Munqalabun is also where it's a place of return. Taqallub is also from the same root, which means struggle. So this heart is always struggling within itself. This is the reality of the heart. It's just never in the same state. This is the reality of the heart. It's always struggling, fighting something or the other within it. So it's okay when you fight your nafs. It's okay when you are struggling in fighting the waswas. It's okay when you're fighting the peer pressure, dealing with that. It's okay, because this is the reality of the heart. It's always in struggle, and it's never in the same state. Sometimes, like a roller coaster ride, it's high, and sometimes it's low. As long as that when it goes low, it doesn't crash, it's okay. As I always say, that it's not the sin which is the problem, it's the gravity of the sin, the frequency of the sin, and when a person stays in the state of the sin, then it becomes a problem. But if a person slips sometimes, bounces back, returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, repents to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, amends his or her affairs for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, increases in good deeds for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's a blessing disguise. The sin is turned into a good deed, 10 good deeds, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells about these people that their hearts have become so hard. It is like what he says next. فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً, being like stones or even harder. This is the dead heart that we spoke about yesterday. So their hearts are being compared to a stone, but actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it is even worse than a stone. And after this, he gives examples of even the types of stones that are better than these people's hearts. Even though there are some scholars who say that the aw here, فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً, the aw here means and. Their hearts are like stones, and even hotter. Others say it means rather. Their hearts are like stones, rather even harder. Ibn Jarir at-Tabari rahimullah says that it is basically, as he has compiled, being a historian, the different tafasir of the meaning. He said that it is to say that there are only two types of hard hearts. Either they are like stones, or they are worse than that. Or they're worse than that. Ibn Kathir rahimullah says that it is much like the earlier ayah, within Suratul Baqarah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the likeness of the person who's, like, for instance, we look into 17 and 19 ayat, whose likeness, the example that is given of a person in that case compared to the rainstorm, like the lightning, the effect on their heart of the truth, of the haqq, of the reality of the ayat of the Quran is like lightning striking their hearts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that many times in the Quran. He gives examples, comparisons, similitudes for us to understand the tone in which we are being addressed. So those people who are in constant, frequent, grave sin, indulge in that and stay in that state, eventually, as we discussed yesterday, their hearts, from being a diseased heart, become a dead heart. For them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it doesn't even matter whether you warn them or not. It doesn't matter. They can witness with their own eyes many, many miracles. It's not going to affect them. However, this is, of course, talking about most of these Jews. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about them. Of course, not all of them, because from amongst them, as I said, were righteous people also, were many, many, many prophets of Allah. But if we don't want to tread the same path, that we keep on doing the same things, knowing it's wrong, being reminded, being warned, admonished through different mediums, things we read or listen to or experience in our lives, if we don't mend our ways while the soul is still intact with the body, eventually this chance, this opportunity will slip away. May Allah protect us. But then, this is not it. Okay, before I go into the three different types of stones, the similitude of which is given to a heart, three different types of hearts, that may seem there's no hope. They may seem it's just not going to work on them, whether yourself or someone else. Allah tells us there is hope. Before we go into that, there's a question that comes to a person's mind. What does it even mean to have a hard heart and a soft heart? Like, if you have to differentiate between the two, as an extension to what we discussed yesterday. You see, a soft heart can be imprinted upon like a Play-Doh. A hard heart is like a dry, hard clay that cannot be molded, that cannot be imprinted upon. So that's why the reminders and warnings that it doesn't work on it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why it gives the example of a stone rather than iron or metal, which can be melted through, passing it through fire. A soft heart is easily affected by reminders and warnings, by mere words of the Quran. As Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah said, the expression of the hardness of the heart is to say that a dead heart, a hard heart which is hopeless, which has become like a stone, rather worse, is just devoid of any form of submission to Allah, regardless of the signs from Allah. But then there are these other hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about 3 different types of hearts, which may be struggling, which may be far away from Allah, but they are not like the first type, the dead heart. These 3 have hope. But how do they come close to Allah? It's not the same, because people are not the same. وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ. For indeed there are stones from which rivers burst forth. There are certain hearts which are certain stones which are better than the hearts of these people. The first type, in the first part of the ayah, the dead hearts. There's certain stones, al-hijara, they are better than their hearts. Even though they're stones, but they're better. Because it could happen that all of a sudden, from within a stone, a river can gush out. يتفجر, يعني gushing out, when water comes down from its source. So even out of stones, there are those from which water springs gush out. Even stones sometimes compromise, but their hearts don't. On the other hand, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a second type, and I'm going to mention first just the 3 types and then explain what it means practically. Then he gives second type of stone as an example, second type of a heart, which is better than theirs. وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَقَّقُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ. And there's some of them that split open and water comes out. So what is the difference between the two? The first one, the water gushes out all of a sudden. This heart changes like that. This stone breaks and water goodness comes out of it like that, gushing out. But then on the other hand, there are stones where maybe it'll have a little crack here, a little bit crack there. Water will drip from here, a little bit from there. It takes time. يشق. It's coming from Shin, Qaf, and Qaf, which basically means shaqqa, or inshaq, is to have something torn, to have a hole in something tear up. Ashaq, يعني the morning, for instance. Now, if there's a little split in a stone, and even though it has a lot of water within it, like a heart which has a lot of potential within it, but there's only a crack in it at the moment. It has taken one step closer to Allah, one step closer to Deen, but it's not all the way there yet. Don't become impatient with such hearts. Because every heart is not the same. Everyone's journey towards complete submission to Allah is not the same. Don't rush this heart, the possessor of this heart. It's on its way. This journey cannot be the same as yours. You cannot paint everyone with the same brush. Maybe you or someone else changed like this, and another person may be taking some time. Don't become judgmental. Or if you're in that situation, don't beat yourself down if you're struggling. Everyone's journey is not the same. So the second type, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, even out of stones, there are those that crack, break open, and water comes out from it, little by little. And then there's a third type of a heart, similar to given to it, of a third type of a stone. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَحْبِثُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. And there's some of them that fall down out of fear of Allah. يحبط يعني حابا يعني to climb down under some kind of pressure, or there's when a person is experiencing something, and that experience causes them within themselves to humble themselves before Allah. That experience that they went through, it could be anything, turned out to be a blessing in disguise, even though initially it looked like a terrible trial. But the trial leads them to tranquility, because it makes them realize what they had been missing on all this time, they were not mindful of. So they crashed down, they tumbled down from the top. They were arrogant ones, ignorant ones, and they become humble before Allah. Even though there are some scholars who say that it is, like for instance, Ibn Kathir rahimahullah himself, he says that this ayah mentions stones being humble as metaphor, according to some of the scholars. While there are other scholars like Imam al-Qurtubi rahimullah, Imam al-Razi rahimullah, who said there's no need for this explanation, because even stones that Allah have created, these stones also have certain characteristics. Yes. Like for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of the heavens and the earth in Suratul Isra. تُسَبِّحُ لَهُ السَّمَوَاتُ, يعني the seven heavens. تُسَبِّحُ يعني the seven, له السماوات, the heavens, السبح والأرض, and the earth. Then he says, وَمَنْ حين, they even glorify Allah. Even they glorify Allah. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about in Surah Al-Rahman about the stars and the trees, وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّجَرُ يَسْجُدَانِ, يعني, and the stars and the trees, يسجدان, even they prostrate themselves, يعني, to Allah. In the 59th surah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of the mountain, that even if لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل, had we sent down this Quran on a mountain, and even that would have crushed. We also know in the hadith of Rasulullah in the Sahih that this, when Rasulullah said this, he was talking about the Mount Uhud, that this is the mount that loves us and we love it. We also know of the compassion of the stump of a palm tree. Compassion is showed upon Rasulullah according to authentic hadith. that it used to, out of compassion for Rasulullah, the stump of the palm tree used to shade him, used to give shade to him. We also know from a hadith reported by Sahih Muslim, where Rasulullah said that I know a stone in Makkah that used to greet me with salam before I was sent. I recognize this stone. I recognize the stone now. We also know of the black stone, that on the day of resurrection it will testify for those who kissed it for the sake of Allah as a sunnah. Not because it has any power or anything, because it was just a sunnah. So there are scholars who say that yes, stones also have these characteristics of humility. So we don't have to really give it the similitude or the explanation of comparing it with a heart. But on the other hand, there are scholars of the first generation who said, no, it is a similitude for the heart. Because sometimes springs and rivers burst out of stones. Yes, the same way goodness sometimes gushes out of certain hearts that were kind of hard or seemed like that they were hard. And there are some stones that may have a little crack and it splits open and water starts dripping from it slowly and gradually. They take time. And there are indeed hearts like that. And yes, there are stones that fall down from the mountains. Out of fear of Allah. Now it could be what we see physically, but also indeed there are hearts like that where after some experience they just can't help themselves but to call upon Allah in submission. But the state of the heart, only Allah knows. Who has potential? Who is a hopeless case? Only Allah knows. It's not for us to judge. It's not for us to weaponize ayat of the Quran against other people, but rather to reflect upon our own selves, our own state, and ask Allah for help. There's nothing hidden from Him. Nothing we say, for He is a Samir. Nothing we can do that He cannot see, for He is Al-Basir. Even the matters of the heart, our past, our future. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends this ayah by saying, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. And Allah is not unaware of you do. غفلة, يعني to abandon something, not being attentive. Allah is always attentive. Now, the thing is, the question that may come to your mind, what leads to hardness of the heart? And what leads to softness of the heart? And what can we do to work towards the purification, the softness, the soundness, stability of the heart? Imam al-Razi rahimahullah explains that sometimes when the heart is exposed to certain things like the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ingratitude, excessiveness, too much worrying about dunya, too many plans, preparation for dunya, ignoring the akhirah, it adversely affects the heart. Sometimes when the heart is exposed to certain things, it takes the heart out from the state of softness and subtleness, thus making it hard to the point that no word can influence it. So it becomes yushbih al-hajar, similar to a stone. No matter what you do to a stone, you squeeze it, you move it, you crush it, try to place your fingerprint on it, it remains a stone. So what are the things that if you expose your heart, yourself to, or that of a loved one, may make you vulnerable towards the hardness of the heart? Exposing your eyes to what is displeasing to Allah. Exposing your ears to what is displeasing to Allah. Exposing your company to what is displeasing to Allah. Being not mindful of the fact that whatever you have is from Allah, thus being ungrateful for it. And the effect of that is that you misuse the blessings of Allah. Now, what leads to a soft heart? Dua, dhikr, Quran, remembering death, good company, good deeds. Even if you feel that what I'm doing, I'm not sincere in it, my intention may be messed up. A lot of people, when they say that, you know what, when my iman is high, I'm going to do this good deed and that and that. I'm going to start praying. I'm going to start doing this and this and this. I'm going to give up this sin. The thing is, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. It's not anywhere mentioned in the Quran or Hadith that when you sit idle, waiting for your heart one day to start beating better, for your iman to be higher, the soul to be more pure, just like that, from nowhere, out of thin air, then it will enable you to obey Allah. No, it doesn't work like that. When you do a good deed, when you obey Allah, that leads to higher iman, which will help you to be more sincere in it, to do it better, in an excellent manner, and consistently. When you keep on doing it, the iman goes even higher. They not only are able to stay consistent in this, but even do more. And then iman goes higher, and then you can do more and be more insincere and can be more focused and can be more consistent. And then iman goes higher and higher and higher. It works like that. It's through the good deeds, amal salih, that iman becomes stronger and stronger. Not through being passive, being idle. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to make a dua. This dua is reported by Sahih Muslim. Even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to make this dua for his heart, for his ilm, for his soul. How can we think that we don't need to make this dua? He used to say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa'. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from knowledge which does not benefit. وَمِنْ قَلْبِي لَا يَعْشَعْ. From a heart that does not fear you. وَمِنْ نَفْسِي لَا تَشْبَعْ. From a soul that is not satisfied. وَمِنْ دَعْوَتِي لَا يُسْتَجَبُ لَهَا. يعني, and the supplication that is not answered. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa' wa min qalbin la yaghsha' wa min nafsin la tashba' wa min da'watin la yustajabu laha. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from knowledge which does not benefit, from a heart that does not entertain the fear or does not fear you, yani, from a soul that is not satisfied, content, and the supplication that is not answered. A believer's heart is that humble that they seek humility, they seek help, they seek refuge. A believer's heart is riqa. A believer's heart is soft and raqiq, gentle. In fact, Rasulullah SAW said, as reported by Abu Hurairah, collected by Muslim, that a group of people, both men and women, whose hearts will be like the hearts of birds, will enter Jannah. يدخل الجنة. They will be there, will enter Jannah. أقوام, a people. أفئدتهم مثل أفئدة الطير, whose hearts will be like the hearts of birds. How are the hearts of birds? Imam Nawawi rahimullah says, and I'm going to end on this. Imam Nawawi rahimullah explains that some scholars say there are يعني قلوبهم الرقيقة, whose hearts are very soft, the like the birds. While others say it is like قلوبهم متوكلين, whose hearts rely on Allah. يعني people who have utter, unconditional, complete trust in Allah. And by the way, trusting Allah means to trust His decree, qadr. Trusting Allah means to trust His laws, His ihkam, with the attitude of sami'na wa ata'na, we hear and obey. And trusting Allah means to trust His word, His kalam Allah, the Quran. Yani, for instance, when He says, you ask me and I will respond. Then if you have made the dua, then you should remember that word of Allah. My job is only to make dua to Allah. When, how, in what form, where He materialized my dua, I cannot dictate that to Him, but I trust 100% unconditionally that it will be the best. When, how, where, in what form He materializes my dua. Whether it is to protect me from some trial because of it, whether to give me something in dunya or in akhirah, maybe in some other form, or maybe, slowly, gradually, whatever it is, I unconditionally trust that He said that if I ask Him sincerely, He will give. Then I must trust Him. And then your heart is at ease after making dua, and you don't say ifs and buts after you've asked Allah. Now, this hadith about those who enter Jannah, that there are these men and women, both these people, their hearts are like the birds. It basically sums up the qualities of the people who are worthy of Jannah. Firstly, just as the hearts of the birds, which are free of jealousy, the hearts of these people deserving Jannah are free of jealousy and envy. Secondly, just as the birds, these hearts are always alert also, cautious of any dangers, cautious of whatever displeasing to Allah, always mindful, alert. They worry about their akhirah because they're alert to not stray away from the path. And they know that if I don't want to commit a sin, if I'm sincere in it, that I don't want to keep on falling to the same trap, that I must not only give up the sin, but every path that leads to it, even if that path is permissible. So even you let go of that route that you know may lead to the sin. You're that conscious and alert. And this heart is active in the remembrance of Allah and affected easily by the words of Allah. And thirdly, just as birds trust in Allah for their food, like, they go out hungry from their nest every morning, but return with full stomachs every evening. Birds don't store food for the next day. They trust Allah, but they, with the help of Allah, also utilize what they have in trying to help themselves. So just like the birds, these people of Jannah have complete trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have tawakkul in Allah, not only concerning their sustenance, but for every other matter, to the point that they know that as long as I follow the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing this is the best system, the moment I stray away from the system that Allah has set for me, for my family, for my society, in every matter, and dunya is within deen, then everything will be inshallah ta'ala fine. Even if apparently sometimes I struggle, it's a blessing in disguise. But the moment I stray away from this system that Allah has set, and I give priority to my own logic, my own experiences or theories, or that of another, to create another system in competition with the system of Allah, there will be injustice, there will be dhulm. Because whenever there is lack of balance within you or around you, in your home, in your society, balance of rights and duties, there will be dhulm done on someone or the other. And to avoid that, we have to follow the laws of Allah, for the one who created us knows how we work and how we do not or cannot work. So this heart trusts Allah, and that's the reason why they follow each and every commandment once they find out about it, without ifs and buts and whys, with the attitude of sami'na wa ata'na, we hear and obey, because this is a sound heart, or a heart that wants to become sound or remain sound. Because it is only the sound heart on the day of judgment that will be the saved heart, the saved soul, the one who comes with a sound heart, as we mentioned in one of the earlier sessions. And because this person, to end the session, inshallah ta'ala, follows the commandments of Allah, then even if externally, in the sight of dunya, in the sight of creation, they're struggling, within them, there is peace, sakina, contentment. That is the level of trust in Allah. That is the level of iman, faith, yaqeen in the system of Allah, in the justice of Allah. That even if I don't get justice in dunya, in a matter, on the day of judgment, the most just will be the only judge. And this person's content. This person has another quality. It always, always, always keeps itself busy in bettering themselves, improving themselves. It never feels complacent within themselves. It never feels safe from hypocrisy or sin or insincerity. As the Salaf used to say, that the one who finds sincerity in their sincerity are truly in need of sincerity. So as long as that we, in this month and of Sha'baan and the month of Ramadan, keep on working on ourselves, we, inshallah ta'ala, with the help of Allah, with the mercy of Allah, will be okay. But the moment you think, I don't need this, I'm all good, that's where you fall into the trap. May Allah protect us. I'm going to end on the words of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. He mentions the journey of the heart towards Allah. He says in Madarij as-Salihin that the heart on its journey towards Allah is as if it was a bird. Hmm? As if it was a bird. القلب في سيره إلى الله عز وجل بمنزلة يعني the journey of it is like الطائر, a bird. Love at its head, fear at or love of towards Allah, or each and everything, each and every one, even for its own self, that keeps it focused, keeps it going, that no matter what strikes it, nothing can crush it. For this is a steadfast soul, a sound heart, a consistent, persistent heart, just like a bird. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.